rolling over to one of the 15 chambers that you're a member of, and you're building up that energy, Diane, and you're like, I need to get ready for this meeting. What song is on max volume when you're pulling into the parking lot?
You know what? I listen to a lot of talk radio.
You ready?
Ready.
All right. Timeout. Tyler, who are we taking a timeout with today?
Well, Kevin, we have the Diane McClure from Edge Advertising. She's the co-owner. She's also was the person of the year, business person of the year with the Webster Chamber. And I also refer to her as my northern mother. So I don't know if you know that, Diane, but when I start to describe people about you, I just say she's like my northern mom, man. I just learned so much from you, Diane. You took me under your wing. You saw me come into the networking field really, really green and fresh and new, and I didn't know what was going on. So we would ask you. What's that?
I heard you before I saw you.
Yeah. Yeah, I get a little fired up from time to time. But Diane, we would have thrown it all the way back to Du Bois High School. We saw that you were
the Mighty Beavers.
the home of the Beavers. Yes, we saw that you were not only in cheerleading, but in band, in chorus, and you were the treasurer. Who in the heck got you into everything, or who drove you to be in so many different, I don't know, fields or different activities while growing up?
It probably happens when you live in a town of 10,000 people.
All right.
Okay. Everybody has to take on more than one role.
That's all right.
My first question to you, Diane, is fill in the blank here. We are
Penn State.
All right. Passed the first test. My sister's a proud Penn State alumni as well. What's your favorite memory down in Happy Valley? Like football tailgating memory. Were you cheerleading on the sides also for Penn State?
Oh, sure. Went to all the Penn State football games for sure. One of my good memories is the ice cream, the creamery. I love ice cream, and they have great ice cream on campus. Retirement job. They have, I think it's a 2-week program where you can be certified in ice cream making. And we brewed in Minneapolis, for about 5 years. And St. Paul had a ice cream festival, and you would go around and taste different ones. And we found out this one creamery were Penn Staters. And so we went and tasted. It was really good. And you know what? It was the early lead of the marble slab, where they're mixing them in. That was the first time we had ever seen it.
And Cold Stone made it famous.
Yeah, right.
Wow, that's awesome. So what if, obviously going back, kind of, again, learn a little bit more about you. You have the music background. I'm sure you can still do a cartwheel from your cheerleading days as well. But what instrument did you play, and what made you choose that particular instrument?
Oh, wow. I chose clarinet. I can't even remember why. It was probably just like with my kids, the instructors sort of try to balance out the band, right? And they say, okay, we need this. And then I went to oboe, and then I went to E-flat clarinet, and then I played flute, and I also play piano and organ.
Oh my! Oh, just throw that one in there too. I could hardly read the music, so I never wanted to practice either. So my mom spent a lot of money on piano lessons, and I don't even know how to play it. So
yeah, I got $5 a week to join orchestra.
Oh wow! Good. Your first job.
Yes, and I had a sweet girl beside me write every note on top of my note for about 3 years until I became like first or second chair. And she says, "Tyler, I think it's time for you to learn how to, read some notes, dude." So.
And what was it in orchestra? What was the instrument?
Violin.
Violin.
Yeah, or the fiddle, different styles you can play. You can either slur it a lot, get a little, country fiddle in there, or you can make the thing weep, whatever you want to do.
I had my girls playing violin when they were young, and it's the Suzuki method, it's before you could read. So they were in preschool. And that was fun. So I could play out Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Stars. Couldn't be good.
And well, hey, we want to go back. So we also saw you worked at Honeywell. So you were in corporate America for a while, it looked like. And so coming from corporate, did you learn, what did you learn most about corporate America on the good side of things?
Well, ownership, building ownership of whatever you're trying to do within your organization. I started off with Honeywell in human resources, and the department heads were really good at working with line management and getting them on board, and then having them be the voice to their colleagues as we took new initiatives forward. So Kevin, you probably can relate to some of that, right?
Yeah, definitely being in the HR side, I wanted to get into that with you because I saw that you also won the almost like top talent award for Honeywell. So obviously they were very impressed with your leadership. But given your background, so for the audience, you got your master's in counseling and education, but now at Edge Advertising, you're a marketing firm. How did you make that leap, and where was your original, like your younger self? Who did Diane want to be at that time?
Well, the leap really were small steps along the way, and I will start off by saying we're an advertising firm. We do not find many small businesses that really want to do the marketing. They want to hop into advertising without really studying their market. But we work with them as well as we can, but we definitely are an advertising firm developing ways in which you can reach your target market. So really, I worked in higher ed after graduating with my master's, and in a counseling role initially, and then in a marketing role as I worked in admissions and marketing the university. So my husband actually finished his MBA, and that took us to Minneapolis. He worked for Pillsbury, and so that was a new environment. And I looked around and said, okay, what does this offer me? And at the time, there were over 100 corporations that were headquartered in Minneapolis. So I sought to get into human resources. It seemed like the next kind of step in dealing with people, taking in my counseling and education skills. I worked in student or employee recruitment initially, having come out of student recruitment, and then got into management and human resources. And then ultimately they sent me here to Rochester to manage a branch.
Wow.
So
I was going
on the way really made sense. It seems like a leap, but it really was a slow step.
I love your point about small steps to get to where you are, because I think a lot of people think that it takes that leap, right? So you clarifying that it was actually small steps and kind of taking that direction forward, I think is awesome. What do you think was your first step, though, in your career, in your development? Obviously, you mentioned the higher education piece. What was that first step? Like, what is your mission statement that you said, this is who Diane is and this is who I want to become?
I think that working at the university, they utilized me right away. I was speaking to large groups. I was traveling, representing the institution, and I guess it made me acknowledge the fact that I liked that, and I didn't fear that. A lot of people would say, oh, I don't want to be put in that position. And so just solidified that was one of the gifts that I've been given. And I know the better you use your gifts, the more fulfilled you are.
You got that right, Diane. And I know you give a lot. You've given me a lot of advice over the past, 8 months. And
what have you taken?
Yes. And I was going to ask you, so I know you network a ton. I call you the queen of chambers too, just from all the chambers that you're in. And so what's the first question you ask somebody when you first meet them to kind of get to know them?
Well, it's more contextual than having my set questions, because many times when I'm out and about, you might walk into a conversation that's already going. So it's just sort of fitting in. And I think that ties back into my comfort level in dealing with people. I don't have to be practiced necessarily. I can listen to what's going on and come up with a relevant question at the time.
Right.
That does help. And I kept seeing this, it seems, again, through kind of our research and reading about Diane and really learning about who you are as a person. The common thread was that you have attention to detail, which I think is very important, but also that you know how to bring out the best in someone. You mentioned using our gifts or our strengths and finding those. What is your greatest interpersonal skill that you feel has facilitated you to become this expert leader that you are today for this thriving Edge advertising group that you're co-owner of? What is your greatest interpersonal skill or asset?
Well, I would say it is an asset, and it's energy. And I know that I have a lot, like Tyler, right? That's right. And a while back, I had been at a physical with my doctor, and he thought he heard a murmur. And he said, gee, I want to have a heart doctor look at your heart. I was like, oh, I remember it was right before Christmas time, and I was so worried about it. And right before I went to the appointment, he called the phone. He said, oh, you don't have to go to the appointment. So we've got your blood work back, and you're low in iron. And he said, what I heard was a viscosity difference. So I told my neighbor, and she goes, and I said, well, wouldn't I know, if I was low in iron, wouldn't I see that in my energy level? He said, well, your body adjusts over time. You might not until you feel a lot better. So I told my neighbor, and she goes, oh no, more energy.
Hey, it's never a bad thing to have a lot of energy. People get excited about it. I think they definitely feed off that excitement. What's you mentioned your secret sauce being energy, which I think is my mom. She was just up the other weekend, and this woman is 64 years old and runs circles around me. They leave for the weekend. I am full recovery mode for multiple days because I'm like, man, you move. But energy, when you're kind of approaching that initial conversation and introduction, what tidbits of advice would you give our audience to really find that passion that they're passionate about, to really draw that out to help others find their strengths as well?
So how do I, well, you know what, you give them room to lead. And whether you're dealing with volunteers in an organization or your staff, you mentioned details a little earlier. It's sometimes that's known as a gender characteristic. Right, guys?
Yes.
And I try to keep that piece in check because I think I got that one down.
Check the male ego. Boom.
Well, bam.
But in doing that, sometimes you do what others should be doing or could be doing. And so you really, or I have to sort of rein in to give others space so they can show their energy and their gifts.
You know me, I have a little bit of energy, and it is nice to not be the man of the hour all the time. To let others fill the room up, to share their ideas, and that's what I've learned about me in the past few years, at least. But Diane, we were wanting to ask you. So you've been in the advertising business for a while. What do you think the keys are to advertising in 2021, coming out of a pandemic? We would just like to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, one baseline which businesses don't want to hear, when you approach a business and trying to help them, they want a quick fix.
Yeah.
And they want to know what's one thing they can do to, turn the corner. And there isn't one thing. It takes multiple forms of communication consistently over time to do it. But also what they don't like to hear is the fact that in today's digital world, they have to be digitally ready for the attention that they're going to earn. And that takes time and money to do. Mm-hmm. And so what we frequently find, especially dealing with the small to mid-sized businesses, they haven't paid attention to all the details over time. They've had multiple people working on their digital presence, which can be social media and websites and their organizational listings they belong to. And what all that does is it confuses the search engine. There is just a variety of information out there about them. It's not consistent. And so when they start driving traffic, which almost close to 100% will hit the online world before they call or go into a business. Agents then confuse them and don't get them to the right place. So before you put money into advertising, you need to clean your house before the party.
Yes.
I say the same thing from the human resources perspective, right? I say the same thing, is that seemingly organizations right now are very challenged to bring back the workforce. Some are having an easier time than others, but it's constantly looking exteriorly instead of interiorly. And really understanding that first you want to probably get your home in order. I love your analogy there. Before you start welcoming others into your home, you need to make sure that it's cleaned, it's to their liking, the temperature is accurate and correct. I love that analogy. The one thing that I wanted to ask you, because you're in advertising, and just like the multi-generational workforce that we have today, communication across those age gaps seems to be very, very different from the outside looking in. What have you found to be the keys in advertising to multi-generations externally for these organizations?
Well, we really have a very fragmented communication system today. And one thing what we're doing today adds to it. And at the same time, we are being told more recently that we as humans are not good multitaskers. So when you're trying to represent a business and choosing the right channel in which to do that, it's difficult because you're leaving a lot behind when you're making that channel decision. So therefore it reinforces the idea that you have to go out with many, many different channels. And really today we're finding a lot of maybe the traditional age segments are more diverse because of probably because of all the selections. The playing field is a little more established today across the board. But we, a lot of our businesses heavily focus on sort of the adult consumer, like 35 to 55. And we have found that, of course, the digital age has taken over from the print, radio, and television days. All the online channels are very important.
Diane, what's the coolest project you've ever worked on? I know you've had some some business overseas and whatnot. Is there any one project that sticks out in your mind?
One that I really liked, just because the reinforcement piece at the end of it. Typically, when we talk to a business, we say you can look 3 to 6 months out, and being consistent that you'll start to see some changes. And it was a new client that came to us. It happened to be retail. They wanted a quick turnaround because it was holiday season. And what we did for them ended up being their revenue because of their point of sale system. The feedback was that 80% of their revenue during the holiday was new dollars from new customers.
From you.
I have to say, well, I had a team working on it. I can't do all that graphic design and website coding. Yeah, I mean, so that was very, rewarding.
Awesome. And you mentioned team. What's your favorite part about being a partner or a co-owner in a company, Diane?
Well, yeah, working with the team, because everybody brings something different, and especially within our group, because there are specific skills to build these advertising mediums that I don't have. I am not a graphic designer. I am not a web developer, like I had mentioned, and so and an audio production engineer. Having those people to do that, which also it enables me to also sit back a little more and let them do what they're gifted to do, because there's no competition here with that.
Yeah. Well, I think you mentioned something really important. You mentioned teamwork. You mentioned taking a back seat as a leader. And I think like your comment earlier about males versus females and kind of that ego conversation. I think it's the whole idea of, again, nature over nurture. My question to you though, as a leader, how have you built that safe space where your employees feel comfortable and confident that no idea is a bad idea and they can share whatever they need because it means the greater for the betterment of the company as a whole and for the offerings that you offer your clients or prospects even. How have you created that safe space for your employees that really has allowed you to flourish in advertising?
Well, I try to hold off in critiquing it right away. I try to start off with questions so I understand the idea more fully. If it's something that I don't feel can work, I give it time before I express that. And also, I'll try to go to the approach, okay, I don't maybe think it can work right now, but how can we make it work? So just trying to reward the process and be open to doing things that are very different than what I've done in the past.
That's really powerful. How we can all make it work, and the key phrase in there, "we," I think is so important too. So today, you're a leader of an organization. You have the background in education and seemingly like counseling as well. How do you apply what you learned in getting that master's program to the way that you approach leadership as a co-owner? Like, how does that factor into the conversations or the wording that you use? What did you learn back then that you're finding applicable today?
Well, definitely listening from the counseling background, and also to be able to sort of quickly absorb what's being said and summarizing it and feeding it back in different terms so the person can acknowledge that I'm understanding it correctly or have the opportunity to correct me. And also the educational background, just the methodology of how you roll things out, information flows, the sequencing of it, the reinforcement of it, the review of it, the reiteration of it, all comes from the didactical background as well.
So back to the Queen of Chambers, like the Queen of Dragons that we saw in the very popular show Game of Thrones. When you're rolling over to one of the 15 chambers that you're a member of, and you're building up that energy, Diane, and you're like, I need to get ready for this meeting. What song is on max volume when you're pulling into the parking lot?
You know what? I listen to a lot of talk radio.
All right. Well, any favorites?
You know what? I listen to Wham quite a bit. Not that I agree with everything I hear on it, but I feel it sort of hits the topics in the area that are being discussed. And so then it sort of sets your mind to look for more information on those specific topics. You know, I do prepare before going into meetings. It may be looking up maybe names that people I've recently met or haven't personally met yet, and I'm going to come in contact with, trying to, you know, reflect on their background, remembering their name. Also from other smaller group meetings, like before going into a chamber meeting, review what we have accomplished, what is on our agenda moving forward in the next month, so I can speak to it at a higher level, and therefore also get more people on board and getting the support needed to pull off those goals. So that's really the preparation I do more than the music preparation. Maybe I should start trying that sometime.
Yeah, rolling in with some Metallica, maybe on full blast. People will be like, who is that lady? I want to talk to her. I love that energy.
Oh, man. Yeah, you do have the energy, Diane. I don't know how you have time to do all this, but And like I keep saying, you've given me so much advice over the past few months, Diane. And I wanted to ask you, what's the best piece of advice you've ever received?
It maybe in the surface it doesn't come out as much. Well, actually two pieces. One was one of our executives at Honeywell said, you always have one chance to lose your reputation. So when you're talking about being prepared, you know,
and that's your attention to detail then.
You can't necessarily take that lightly. The other piece, more operationally, I used to have a boss that would drive me nuts because he would triple book himself. And I kept saying, why do you do this? And he said, invariably things fall off. And they do. And even when things get maybe overwhelming because of all the action items you have to take care of or the meetings that are on your calendar, things do change, priorities readjust. And if it doesn't look good today, plan on it looking different when you wake up tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So he would triple book his meetings knowing that people would fall off. Is that what you said?
That's what he said. Yeah, he would triple book knowing that someone's going to fall.
Interesting methodology. I'm going to start doing that. It could get interesting if all three show up. I'm not sure how you talk yourself out of that, but you mentioned reputation. What do you? How have you been able to build the brand of Diane locally? Rochester is sometimes jokingly referred to as the good old boys club. How have you been able to break in, and how have you been able to find your difference or competitive advantage to really break into here in Rochester?
Well, yeah, I really felt that when I came here, and I've lived in two different places in Pennsylvania. I lived in Minnesota, and I've lived here. I've really never been a part of a community that was so country club oriented and with golfing as the main focus. And it just so happens that my business partner is one of the top golfers.
Well, when it snows 10 months out of the year in Minnesota, maybe that's why. But it snows what, 9 months out of the year here. So who knows?
That's good. I'm a skier, so that is good. I was going to say, I just remember thinking about that though, and seeing him as the golfer and having grown up here. I have not grown up here. I'm not the golfer, even though I have tried very much. You know, and I thought, you know, how am I, back to your question, how am I going to get interconnected and make my statement here? And it was really through being open to accepting roles and responsibilities in a variety of organizations like chambers, networking groups, nonprofit volunteering, you know, that being willing to sign up to do things beyond my own world that really connected me.
And is that one where we talk about comfort zone? We talk about everybody being in their comfort zone. It sounds like you're constantly challenging yourself, taking on roles like back in high school for the Beavers. I mean, you did 15 different things for the high school, and granted, it was a town of 10,000. But has that always been you? Have you always been seeing just ways that you can improve yourself personally and professionally?
Really looked at it that way. It goes back to my energy, and it's almost like, okay, now what am I going to do to fill my time? I mean, I constantly find myself getting involved in all those things just because I know I have energy to do it. And I take on those roles. I even take on those kind of roles within my friend group. And I even, as I go back to Pennsylvania and to visit, a lot of my friends will say, well, we haven't seen each other since you've been here last, you know, it's because they wait for me to come and coordinate.
Diane, where do you think that energy comes from?
The good Lord.
I don't like asking that question because I get that question asked to me a lot, and I have no clue, you know, besides my mother probably. You know, she was the lady who got all pumped up to go to the dang grocery store type lady. So you have no idea where it comes from either?
Well, a cousin of mine just reminded me this week that when I was a baby, she called up the doctor and said, this newborn has been up for 24 hours. What are we going to do?
And Kevin's about to be a dad, so I'm sure he loves to hear that.
Man, I better start sleeping for 24 hours straight now while I get the chance.
Well, you have a babysitter here that'll be outside.
Perfect. Don't offer, because I might take you up on it.
It's my northern mom, Kevin.
Yeah, exactly. The northern motherly figure that you are. You could go back and tell yourself, Diane, one thing, your younger self that was up for 24 hours straight. What would you tell yourself?
Probably listen more. Even though I've talked a lot about listening, I have to constantly remind myself because I can talk.
We all can. We're never short of words either ourselves, so we could talk all day if we had to. When you are getting out of bed, though, and kind of creating this, you got the opportunity to create your own company, and we all talk about missions, visions, values. What are your core principles or most valuable like the values that you think are most important to a successful business, but also a leader?
Well, I base what I do on my Christian faith. And I think that carries me through in how I treat people and how I direct my own life. That leads to the integrity that I exercise and feel it's important, just like your father was saying with your last name, and how important that is to do the right thing and uphold that image in that name that people have been building on for generations before you. And that definitely is the foundational piece. And from there, I look at what's placed before me on any given day as served to me to do something with. Mm-hmm. And so that then, when I confront it or I'm asked to do something, I hop on it because I feel like that has been directed to me, and then use whatever gifts I can to be able to accomplish that.
I love the faith. The faith piece is so important, right? Because there's difference between the Sunday goers that go for that hour just to check the box, and then they're leaving the parking lot, and they'll probably hit you if you're in their way. What other ways do you think faith and like religion and kind of you're actually listening on those Sundays when you're hearing the sermons, it sounds like, and applying it and seeing what strength God has given you? What do you think? How else do you think you apply your faith to leadership?
Well, disappointments that come along, and in the business world, they can come frequently, and trying to separate my mindset from those types of experiences so that I can quickly move on to the next task at hand versus being drugged down.
But and when a big deal, say you lose out on a big deal, how do you keep your team motivated over there? I know you have the energy to move on quickly, but you find yourself have to kind of drag others with you to get over that, big loss per se?
Usually, luckily, we have a lot of tasks on everybody's plate all the time. So really, we can always focus on the future and what's at hand in the next step. And we communicate a lot. And so we are always in agreement with, okay, what are our priorities for the day? And because our team produces the actual communications that we use in advertising, there's a lot of checkpoints. And so there is a lot of back and forth evaluating and approving to move ahead on different items. So that helps. And then also any kind of successes and customer feedback or just any kind of metric that points to the positive, make sure we share that with the whole team and point out who was responsible, who was involved in making that happen, and really give that credence to those people.
Music to my ears. I say that all the time. It's so damning, I think, when leaders want to take an idea from their team and then present it as their own. Because I think that's the quickest way to get them to that creativity, the engagement to be theoretically cut off. You talked about kind of developing this team and kind of winning as one mentality. We understand one of the fundamental building blocks of that is trust. How do you quickly build trust both in networking, the Queen of Chambers, but also as a co-owner there at Edge Advertising? How do you quickly develop trust with somebody else?
Well, just watching what is done and when it is done. And I've experienced this probably even more so in the volunteer world. you learn who you can trust to do what they say they're going to do. And, first time shame on you, second time shame on me. So, allow others to do their part and stay tuned with the results and take that into account when you need the help the next time and who's the best for that job.
People always ask me, the same question, how do you build trust? And I just tell them kind of what you say, Diane. I show up when I'm going to show up, and I'm going to do what I'm going to do. I think you've told that about me to a few folks. If you could write a book, what would it be? And what would the title be?
Actually, I would like to write a children's book about Penn State memories.
Oh, yes.
We are.
What? That would be awesome.
But let's see. Finding You would be the title. Because no matter how capable anybody seems to be, they have something they're contributing.
That's one of the biggest. That's one of the biggest things that I know Tyler and I have learned from doing this podcast. And you're our fourth guest, and we're so excited to share your wisdom and insights with our listeners. But it's amazing what everybody in this world has to teach someone one thing from their life experiences, their past, things that they've learned the hard way. Lead by example is another trait that we hear about. We hear this idea of mentors, and that seems to be like you're Tyler's northern mother, so obviously you're a mentor to Tyler specifically. But I noticed also with other people that have worked out through internships for you, they refer to you as, again, the attention to detail, but more importantly, your idea towards mentorship and the power of mentorship. Who is Diane's mentor?
I use a lot of people as mentors. And because I do perceive that everybody has some level of contribution. I even have one customer who's very faith-based oriented and utilize that customer many times in one-on-one conversations to bounce things off of, because I know we come from the same foundation. Even little children and even my kids without the experience that I've had, they have wisdom to share, and they see the world differently than I see it, and it never ceases to amaze me. Something that they'll say really triggers my thought in a different direction.
Glad to hear that, Diane. And I was just wanting to ask you, what would Diane McClure do if she knew she couldn't fail at it?
Scuba dive.
Scuba dive.
Scuba dive.
What is failure in scuba dive? Death? Is that is that the failure?
I love the water. I mean, I love the water. I could be in water every day, but I also panic, and so I don't perceive that that's a good trait in scuba diving, because that's the last thing. Because it would be pretty much all me. I mean, I'm sure someone, a trainer's down there with me, but yeah, you can't do that.
And live to tell the tale, yeah.
Yeah. So if I could control the panic, I would love to try scuba diving.
Okay. What would be one skill that you would love to acquire if you could and wake up tomorrow and be an expert in?
A skill of being a little more futuristic. Because I do pay attention to the details, also because I listen to talk radio and not so much the music, because I would choose to read nonfiction versus fiction, I feel that I really have not used that piece of my brain as much as I could. And the idea that we only use 10% of our brains in our life, I feel there's some resources there that I really could.
Definitely. I'd like to get that other 90% firing myself.
So I feel that that's tied with being more futuristic, the skill of really imagining for the future. So that's something that I could work on.
And I think that's important for business, right? Is like we mentioned adaptation, we mentioned change. You mentioned from going from more digital now than you've ever seen before, and kind of paper and the typical ways that we've been doing it previously are no longer as fruitful as they once were. One of the things that you also mentioned earlier about talk radio, you mentioned that you didn't love everything that they talked about, right? And seemingly, I think that's kind of where the rest of the country is right now. We have a very divided country, and I'm not getting into politics, but you've seen from an advertising perspective, media is obviously under a lot of scrutiny right now because they tend to put their own spin or flair on stories. From an advertising angle, how do these media companies rebuild that trust with the general public so we don't have that distrust and we can actually tune in at 6 o'clock?
They need to get back to reporting on the facts and less speculation. I really tire of the news that, well, maybe this would happen, or we're wondering if this. I want to hear what did just happen. And then also, just having that investigatory approach that if you don't know what has happened, that the media has the people they can send out to really spend time digging into it more. With our local media centers, and it's happened across the whole United States, the loss of employees has been tremendous. And this happened way before COVID. Mm-hmm. And a lot of it, they're dependent upon agencies like us to deliver mm-hmm. the news. And that's been a plus for us because public relations is one of the services that we deliver, and they are dependent on our stories. So our customers make the stories, and we put the stories together, and then we deliver them to the media, and they make choices on what they're going to run from that. And that's great, but also I think the media has sort of backed off in that whole investigatory piece mm-hmm. and reporting on the facts.
Assumptions are so dangerous.
Aren't always heard as assumptions because people do try to multitask today and don't do it well. And people skim when they read versus reading. And so an assumption is offered, and they might not have heard that as an assumption. They might walk away with that thinking that was a fact. So it just promotes a lot of wrong information out there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So as we're wrapping up, I think Tyler's got one more for you, and then we're going to jump into the last segment here, which is one of our favorites, and we know that you'll get a kick out of it.
Birthday present angle. Did you ever have a favorite Nittany Lion? Was it Kajana Carter?
I'm sorry, what was that last? Oh, a Nittany Lion player?
Yeah, I was going to get you a football jersey for your birthday, Diane, and I just need to know which one.
Oh, boy. Where's my husband when I need him? Let me see. I should be able to pull this out.
You know, my sister's favorite, Saquon Barkley, and now she's a Giants fan now, too.
Flutie.
All right.
There we go. So, Diane, as we're wrapping up, I wanted to just kind of call out some of the things that we learned from you is the importance of teamwork, the importance of empowering your employees, but always day in, day out. I think the critical piece that you shared with us is bring the energy. Every day is a new day, but bring the energy, and people will be excited to want to be around you. As we head into the last part of the show, we like to ask our guests the stereotypical interview questions that you are probably asking some hopefuls to come and work for you there at Edge Advertising, and maybe some of the same questions that you did for Honeywell. Tyler, what is your first interview question?
Well, my first interview question for you, Diane, would be, give me a time that you had a stressful situation, and how did you handle it?
Well, probably the most stressful situation was the loss of my daughter. And how I handled it was through submission. The world had to go on, and people rushed in and picked up our world. And for someone who's used to doing it and leading it, that's a tough thing. But at those moments, there was no other choice because all your energy is taken away from you. So submission was the lesson.
Wow. So we talked about a ton of your strengths. We talked about obviously what has made you an effective leader. So my question to you is that we always focus on our strengths, and sometimes people put more energy focusing on their weaknesses. What is the one weakness that you have identified that you would like to turn into a strength?
One weakness really can be the details. And especially when I want to build futuristic skills, I need to get out of the weeds.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, detail oriented can help me achieve at times, but also can hold you back. So there has to be a good balance, and you have to know when to back off at what time.
Mm-hmm. Paralysis from overanalysis is what I always say. Well, Diane, I know I've enjoyed my time with you. Tyler, thank you so much for introducing me to your northern mother here. I can understand why you have gravitated to such an impactful individual like yourself, Diane. So thank you so much. Yes, I will. My wife will vet you out, I'm sure. She'll ask you a few questions of her own, but we might take you up on that for a future date night. So
I love babies.
All right. Well, sign yourself up, Diane. Mondays and Tuesdays, I think we have an opening. Well, thank you so much, Diane. It was a pleasure, and we appreciate it so much. And thanks for sharing our story with Timeout for Leaders. And everybody, please join us next week again for another awesome, incredible leader. But this week, Diane, it's been an absolute pleasure, and thank you so much again for your time.
You're welcome. It was fun, you guys.
All right, Diane, we'll see you.
Thank you, Diane.